Sammy!
Hey everyone, I'm the Canadian Lad, and today I watched Ryan Coogler's Sinners at 0.25x speed and found 24 incredible hidden details that you may or may not have seen before. I thought watching this film in slow motion would be a difficult task, but boy did I discover some hidden details and meanings while watching it. If you already love this movie, by the end of this video, you'll appreciate Sinners on a whole new level. The movie is so dense with so many hidden layers, watch till the end, you'll know what I'm saying. But please spare me just 90 seconds to thank today's sponsor, PIA VPN. Put your hand up if you currently don't have a VPN. If your hand is up, then you really need to hear what I'm about to tell you. Today's video is supported by PIA VPN. A VPN is an app that hides your IP address and safeguards your internet connection through an encrypted tunnel, essentially shielding your digital presence from peeping toms trying to exploit your precious information. Whenever you're browsing online on an unprotected device, your device is transmitting a great amount of information out into the open, which can be viewed by your ISP, government sensors, advertising companies, and more. And when you connect to the internet on a public Wi-Fi, your data can be much easier to access or steal. Using the internet without PIA VPN is like using a public bathroom with see-through walls. Everyone can see your private business. And since pretty much everything we do now lives online, whether it's work, banking, streaming, or just scrolling social media, you've got to keep your data safe. The best part is, unlike other VPNs, PIA doesn't limit your devices. One subscription covers your whole household or workspace. Their transparency and no-logs policy assures customers that their data isn't stored or recorded, and this has even been audited and proven in court. No wonder over 30 million people have already downloaded it. PIA is available on all platforms and even supports P2P file sharing. Use my link in description or scan the QR code to get exclusive 83% off and extra 4 months for free. Oh, and you can try it risk-free with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Just head over to piavpn.com/thecanadianlad. Try it out yourself and you'll also be supporting the channel. Number 1. When we first meet Ramek, he's horribly burned and has a black eye. But the moment he gets a taste of Brad's blood, we can see the burn marks slowly decreasing. And by the time he arrives at the juke joint, he's completely healed. So the more blood a vampire drinks, the faster they recover from injuries. And this rule doesn't just apply to Ramek. Take Stack for example. Mary sinks her teeth into his neck early on, and you can clearly see the nasty bite mark it leaves. But then later, after he and Mary feed on people leaving the joint, notice Stack's bite mark is almost healed. But there's one vampire who doesn't follow this healing pattern, Conrad. Notice Conrad's face does not heal at all after he gets shot in the face by smoke. His face stays messed up all the way through. At first, you might think, okay, maybe it's because Stack was bitten while he was still human and Conrad got shot after turning. But that theory falls apart when you look at Mary. She gets lit up with bullets by smoke, yet she heals almost instantly. So why doesn't Conrad heal in the same manner? Well, the answer is, his gunshot wound leaves his mouth blown wide open in a horrendous way. And because of that, he doesn't actually swallow enough blood from his prey. And this ends up costing him, because without consuming enough blood, his body cannot regenerate like the others. And I think that's a great continuity detail that most people seem to have missed. Number 2. When Ramek lands outside the Hogwood nephew's house, there are no birds anywhere, the sky is completely empty. But the second he gets inside, 3 vultures suddenly began circling above the house. And by the time the Choctaw forces leave, those vultures have now fully landed on the rooftop. This is because Ramek is undead, and by this point, he has probably already killed the Hogwood nephew. Now, vultures don't actually behave like that. If there's food, they don't politely circle first, they just land and start eating. So the vultures in this film are kind of different and symbolic. It's a visual signpost that death is already inside that house. Number 3. There's actually a recurring detail with the vultures and Stag that's easy to miss if you're not looking for it. We see them hovering over him in more than one occasion. First, when the twins are waiting for Hogwood to show up, and second, when Stag was driving to go hire Delta Slim. Now, we've learned that the vultures usually circle around the dead. So why are they following Stag when he's still alive? This implies that the vultures aren't just scavengers in this film. They can sense death coming. And here's where it gets even more intentional. In one of the promotional photos showing the twins, played by Michael B. Jordan from that exact scene, notice the vultures aren't there, which suggests 2 things. Either the photo was taken before the CGI birds were added, or the studio intentionally kept them out of the marketing to hide that symbolism. Either way, it proves those vultures weren't just some random background element. They were carefully added, foreshadowing Stack's death long before it happened. Number 4. The very first time we see Ramek, pay close attention to how he enters the frame. He doesn't run in from the side, he actually flies in, landing from above. Now, Ryan Coogler confirmed he wanted it to feel like a fallen angel dropping from heaven. But once I realized Ramek was a vampire, the first thought I had was, wait, how did he survive when the sun was still out? it. And this one simple question unlocked two hidden details for me. First, take a look at his condition. His body looks wrecked, but most importantly, he has got a black eye, and that's not from sunlight, which means the Choctaw forces who were hunting him actually had him captured. They beat him down hard, which explains his black eye. And the reason he escapes during daytime, it's probably because he knew that was the only time they would let their guard down, which means Remick literally risked burning himself alive just to break free. And that shows how powerful and desperate he really is. And when he tells that couple that Choctaw took his wife, we do see a wedding ring still on his hand. So maybe he wasn't lying. The Choctaw knew exactly who he was, had him hostage, and likely killed his wife too. And here's a second detail I figured. Remick probably didn't just walk out of wherever he escaped from. Think back to how he enters the frame. He's landing. This indicates he transformed into a bird to make that journey. On foot, he would have combusted in seconds. Flying was the only way out. Now, if Remick can turn into birds, what if those vultures circling throughout the movie aren't just vultures at all, but vampires in bird form? This opens up a whole new way of looking at those scenes. So perhaps every time we see a vulture, it might not just be death circling overhead, it could be another vampire watching the story unfold. Number 5. At one point, Remick tries to strike a deal with Smoke. He says if they hand over Sammy, he'll let everyone else live. And his reasoning is that Sammy's music can transcend time, which means through Sammy's gift, Remick can reconnect with the ancestors he lost. But I think there's more to it than just that. Remember he tells that couple that Choctaw took his wife? And notice even after turning countless people into vampires, Remick never once removes his wedding ring. We see him still wearing it during the iconic Rocky Road to Dublin jig. That's not an accident. It shows he's still holding on to her. So maybe Sammy's gift isn't just a way to reach ancestors. Maybe he thought Sammy's music could help him see his wife again. At the end of the day, his obsession with Sammy might not be about power at all, but about love twisted into something tragic. Number 6. Throughout the film, you'll notice that Smoke's hands shake. The very first thing we see him do is check his watch, but he has to grab his left hand with his right to steady it, so he can actually read the time. This scrambling explains why he has trouble rolling a cigarette for himself later in the film. It's probably PTSD tremors from his time serving in World War I. Which is why his brother Stack would always roll cigarettes for him, handing them over whenever Smoke needed one. That's also why when he's alone, he usually smokes a pipe instead. But after Stack dies, Smoke loses that support. He can't roll a cigarette on his own anymore, and that's why the next time we see him smoking, he takes a cigarette from Hogwood right before shooting him. Number 7. In the mid-credit scene, when Stack and Mary come to meet older Sammy, notice the bartender and Sammy's reflection perfectly show up in the mirror, but Stack's reflection is not there at all. This is because vampires don't cast reflections in mirrors, since they have no soul. Number 8. When Sammy smashes his guitar over Remick's head, notice how smoke starts coming out of the wound, just like when they burn under sunlight. This detail indicates that Sammy's guitar, which the twins inherited from their father, must have had real silver in it, and that's why it was able to hurt Remick in a way no ordinary weapon could. So if you think about it, this guitar is what ultimately saved Sammy's life, which explains why he never gave it up, no matter how many times his father told him to let it go. But there's a darker layer here too. Keep in mind, the guitar originally belonged to Smoke and Stack's father, who we know was an evil man. Sammy's father even warned him that the blues he played on the guitar could attract the devil. So it's possible that this guitar was cursed right from the beginning. But maybe his father prayed over it or enchanted it with some kind of spell, binding the guitar so it would never take Sammy's life, which is why it eventually ends up saving him from Remick. Number 9. When Smoke tells Sammy, "I met plenty of musicians, I ain't never met a happy one." It may sound like just some casual wisdom from an older man, but it's actually another piece of tragic foreshadowing. Because later we see Sammy grow up to become a legendary musician, but the truth is, deep inside he never truly felt free or happy after that night in the juke joint. So Smoke's line ends up functioning almost like a prophecy, a warning Sammy couldn't escape, no matter how far his music carried him. Number 10. In the opening intro, Annie explains Sammy's powers, how his music can bend space-time and even conjure spirits from the past and the future. But if you look closely at this illustration of the Irish dancing and singing, you'll notice 3 birds circling above them. So right from the start, the film is hinting that the Irish were already being attacked by vampires. The 3 birds here, of course, represent the 3 vultures we keep seeing throughout the film. Number 11. Early on in the film, Smoke and Stack might look like they're dressed alike. Sharp suits, slick style, but there's a hidden detail here. Their clothing reflects the gangs they ran with back in Chicago. Stack is decked out in a fedora and a pinstripe suit, the kind of style you'd expect from Italian mobsters in the 1940s. On the other hand, Smoke is rocking a skelly cap and a tweed suit, exactly exactly like the Irish mob who ran the north side of Chicago. The film actually gives us a clue to tie this together. Mary says that before the twins returned to Mississippi Delta, they had been ripping off both the Italians and the Irish in Chicago. So their outfits aren't just about looking slick. They're visual nods to the worlds they came out of, and the gangs they used to align themselves with. Number 12. Bo and Grace's characters and the fact that they run 2 grocery stores are a direct nod to real history. During that era, many Chinese immigrants came to Mississippi Delta and built their lives by opening small stores. And because white-owned businesses refused to serve black communities, it was mainly the Chinese families who would do business with both sides. According to The Untold Story of America's Southern Chinese, in 1940, more than 70% of Delta's population relied on a Chinese community of just 743 people for their groceries and everyday goods. Now, if you look closely at how the film designs Bo and Grace's 2 stores, the attention to detail is incredible and paints a perfect picture of the Jim Crow South. Bo runs the black side of the stores, while Grace runs the white side. The black store is stripped down and purely practical. It offers produce, tools, and household essentials like booms, mops, and buckets, items tied to labor and survival. Even the candy here is hard and long-lasting. Across the street, though, the whites-only store paints a completely different picture. It's brighter, fuller, and more indulgent, lined with soft candies, cakes, fruit, and branded goods. The walls are covered in advertising, and the space feels curated for comfort and consumption, rather than necessity. It was truly crazy times there. Number 13. Sammy reads verse 10:13 from 1 Corinthians. It says, "No temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind. And God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, He will also provide a way out so you can endure it." And this verse lines up perfectly with Sammy's entire journey. He's tempted and lured in by the twins through his passion for music. And that temptation ends up costing him massively. He loses everyone that night. But just like the verse promises, Sammy finds a way to endure. He learns to cope, to carry the weight of what happened, and to keep moving forward. Number 14. Smoke and Stack don't just stand out because of their personalities, even their color palettes in the film tell a story. Blue is the theme for Smoke and Annie, and it's not just a random choice. In the film, blue symbolizes a connection to the spiritual world. That's why both of them are often shown wearing different shades of it. Blue also carries meanings like serenity, wisdom, and sadness. This ties in perfectly with their backstory, since Smoke and Annie are still grieving the loss of their child. Production designer Hannah Beechler even confirmed that Annie's home was designed using Haint Blue, a very specific shade tied to Southern tradition and spirituality. Now let's talk about Stack, because his color language couldn't be more different. His palette leans heavily into red, and red here represents blood, life, and being engulfed in darkness. You can see this in how the cinematography frames him, often in shadows, like he's half consumed by them. But red is also the color of danger, power, and sexuality, and all of those elements connect directly to Stack's story, especially his relationship with Mary. Number 15. When Ramek takes his first victim, Hogwarts' nephew, notice inside their home we can see a baby crib. Now Lola Kirk, who plays Joanne, confirmed in a video that our character's backstory is that they have lost their baby. It's a great parallel to Smoke and his wife, who also lost theirs. Number 16. Inside the church, look at the rafters above the altar, and you'll see 3 crosses on the wall. Production designer Hannah Beechler explained that these are deliberately placed to represent the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So when Sammy and his father are standing in front of those crosses, they themselves are meant to represent a 4th cross, where Samuel has a decision to make. Does he leave music behind and re-establish his faith, or follow his passion for music? So the set design is literally framing Sammy's crossroads moment here with those crosses in the background. Which brings me to my next detail, number 17. The crossed beams at the very top of the church aren't just there randomly. They're actually a subtle nod to Chadwick Boseman, who of course played Black Panther, also directed by Ryan Coogler, and was a close friend of his. The beams are crossed deliberately to symbolize the iconic Wakanda Forever gesture that T'Challa made throughout the Marvel films. Number 18. When we see Sammy out on the plantation picking cotton, notice he's the first one to be there and completes his work for the day before the rest of the villagers even arrive. Sammy was in a rush. He wanted to get all of his responsibilities out of the way as fast as possible, so that he could free up time to join his twin cousins. It shows his drive to be where the music is, rather than stuck in the fields. Number 19. Ramek being Irish isn't just a random character choice. It actually connects to a bigger piece of history. Back in the 19th century, Irish immigrants and Black Americans were often crammed into the same neighborhoods, fighting for the same housing, the same jobs, and the same scraps of opportunity. Both groups were treated like second-class citizens, but the Irish eventually found a way to climb up the social ladder by leaning into their whiteness, and that's exactly what Ramek does in this film. At first, he empathizes with the oppression Black Americans face, but in the end, he weaponizes his whiteness as a tool of power, and by doing that, he becomes the very thing he once hated: forcing his way of life onto others. Ramek says he saw Christians take his father's land, which means he was alive long before the island was fully converted to Christianity. And that makes him at least 1300 years old in the film. And here's the irony. Ramek is so obsessed with someone stealing his culture and history that he doesn't even realize he's repeating the same oppression by imposing his way of life on everyone else. Number 20. At the very end of the film, Annie, who's now dead and holding their baby, calls Smoke by his real name Elijah and tells him to put out the cigarette because she doesn't want any of that smoke reaching the baby. Hearing this, Elijah immediately puts out the cigarette, lights up Hogwood, and lets Smoke die for good before taking his baby as Elijah. It's his last act of closure, doing the final bad deed of his life, letting go of his past, and literally making sure there's no more smoke left. That means Annie wasn't just talking about the smoke from the cigarette. She was speaking metaphorically about Elijah's own alter ego, his smoke persona, which he has to leave behind if he wants to hold his baby. Number 21. When Delta Slim shares a story about his friend Rice who was wrongfully killed, we never actually get any visual flashbacks of the event, but Ryan Coogler made sure we feel it anyway through the background sound effects. Every gunshot, every scream, every subtle noise from that incident is layered into this scene. It's a reminder that in this movie, the music and background score aren't just there to fill the silence. They're doing half the storytelling for us, sometimes even more so than the visuals themselves. Number 22. During the mid-credit scene, we see old Sammy, now played by Buddy Guy, performing in his jazz club 60 years later. Now notice the club's name is Perlene's, and that's a tribute to Perlene, the woman Sammy fell in love with, but tragically lost during that fateful night at the juke joint. It draws a parallel between Sammy and Ramek, who just couldn't let go of the love they lost. Number 23. Sinners is also a sharp commentary on how racism can be self-destructive. Think about it, if this couple had actually listened to what the Choctaw forces were saying, instead of being racist and responding with aggression, they might have survived, at least she could. In fact, when Ramek saw the clan robe inside their home, he immediately knew he had nothing to worry about. The Choctaw forces aren't gonna interfere there, and that's when he can act without restraint. Number 24. By the end of the film, the twins make choices that are the exact opposites of each other. Smoke fully embraces his real identity as Elijah, leaving behind his violent Smoke persona. Stack, on the other hand, does the opposite. In the mid-credit scene, he's still wearing a ring that says Stack, meaning, unlike Smoke, he continues to lean into his violent persona rather than letting it go. And here's a bonus detail. When Ryan Coogler shows us Sammy's power bending time through his music, notice how he carefully includes specific ancestors from the past and musicians from the future, figures who were literally born out of the blues. In other words, this isn't just a trippy sequence. It's Ryan's way of showing that R&B, hip-hop, and so much of today's music all trace their roots back to the blues. And that's it. This would be my breakdown of Sinners at 0.25x speed. Honestly, I don't think I've seen a better film this year than this. Ryan Coogler has truly crafted a masterpiece. It's a vampire movie where vampires don't show up until 44 minutes of the movie. And that just shows how much thought went into world building and character development before the supernaturals even show up. Ramek is a villain who presents a logical temptation. Stack and Mary are the prime examples of falling into it. In a way, they're the only real winners of Sinners. They got a good deal because of Ramek. Had they not been turned, the cruel world around them wouldn't have allowed them to be together. But at the same time, Ramek becomes the very thing he once hated. And that's why I always say a good hero can make a good film, but a great villain can turn a good movie into a great film. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and thanks again to PIVPN for sponsoring this video. Check out my link in description. I'll see you lads in the next one.